Well, a little bit of breaking news here on a Thursday. We're going to talk about it. That is that UConn to the Big 12 is dead for now. For now. Okay. The key here is paused. Brett Yormark says he has paused discussions with UConn, presumably and reportedly because of a lot of pushback internally and a little snag about UConn not being able to leave the Big East until 2027, which is not as fast as Brett Yormark was hoping to make all of this happen. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to break down week 2 in college football as well. An opportunity here, opportunity for the Big 12 to get at least a little bit back on the Big 10 and SEC after a big thud occurred last week when the Big 12 got a chance at Penn State, one of the bigger boys from the Power 2 conferences. So I know this is a very unconventional time. It's an unconventional day, but I did not get a chance to do my show last night. Appreciate you guys for being understanding there and for checking out the Bob Thompson interview instead, which turned out to be rather prophetic that the Bob Thompson interview was recorded and dropped just before we got this news, this latest update about UConn and the Big 12, because Bob, as you can tell from the video, is somebody who is a little bit more pessimistic about that actually working to the Big 12's advantage, that being adding UConn. So there's that. I have a lot of thoughts that you just picked up in the Open for Business Big 12 newsletter, if you are a subscriber, about what is coming for week 2 in the league. And, nationally here, if you want to expand this out a little bit, we have a lot of really interesting games. There's really only one huge game being Texas and Michigan, and that's not even a product of conference realignment. That was a non-conference game that was already scheduled. We have one massive game, one huge game there, and the rest, it's just a lot of really kind of intriguing matchups and cross-conference matchups in the Power 4. Perhaps headlined the rest of the group by Colorado, Nebraska. Now, I'm not here to say that Joel Klatt, who had that on his 10 most influential games of the year list, belongs that high in terms of how it's actually going to impact the college football season. But in terms of just a really fascinating game with some brands that, whether current or from 1995, hold some value, it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, because I do not have any kind of read. I have no kind of read there, but I think it's a massive game that could really springboard somebody depending on who actually wins. So that's kind of the stage here. I don't know that this will be a particularly long show, but I do want to cover all the UConn thoughts that I do have. And then I want to cover all of the week 2 thoughts that I have. And we'll get you out of here in plenty of time to watch America's team, the Kansas City Chiefs, tonight open up the NFL season. I saw a tremendous tweet earlier today. I think it's an old tweet that somebody was passing around, but it just said, the worst part about being a Chiefs fan is that sometimes you turn a Chiefs game on and it's not even the Super Bowl. It's just some regular game. And that's how I feel tonight. That is how I feel tonight. All right. Appreciate everybody who is here for hanging out with me. Here's what we have on the Big 12 and UConn. It was interesting because Brett Yormark in the league sent out a statement to many media members today, and that's where all of this comes from. Brett Yormark says, as commissioner, it is my responsibility to explore a variety of value-creating opportunities on behalf of the Big 12. Following detailed discussions with my conference colleagues alongside UConn leadership, we have jointly decided to pause our conversations at this time. We will instead focus our attention and resources to ushering in this new era of college athletics. So previously, we had not seen Brett Yormark directly address UConn, and you don't often, throughout all of these sorts of things, ever hear a commissioner directly address a school. And that is, typically by design. For instance, if it's a school that's in a current league right now, you don't want, you worry about tampering and legalities of all of this, any consequences you could endure because of mentioning a team specifically. Brett Yormark was asked the other day, we played the clip here, the Fox 4 Kansas City reporter who had asked him about it. And he kind of smirked, but did not actually divulge the school's name, and gave some version of what the beginning of that quote was, hey, it's my job to explore all the value creating opportunities that we have out there on behalf of the Big 12. Now, why does this happen? I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. Look, a lot of you guys really pushed back. I mean, first thing that came into the chat here tonight, not sure why you would want UConn when you might get ACC teams, right? There was a lot of pushback. People don't like UConn football, to which my response on that was always, well, what's being reported is that they would have to hit financial benchmarks to get there, and it would be 7 years before they're there. Who knows what's happening in 2030 when some of these TV contracts start to run out. Feels to me just like a rental of UConn basketball and a maybe on the football. But hey, a lot of people just don't want to get anywhere near UConn football, and I can understand it. I don't understand also like why having UConn basketball and then UConn football on this like wait and see track would ever prevent you from adding ACC schools. But it does appear, both from reporting and just a little bit of what had been passed down to me, that there is a sentiment of like, look, we're overloaded now. There's too much. We're dealing with the house settlement stuff. We're dealing with revenue sharing. You've got us considering private equity and naming rights. We're trying to onboard the 4 new schools that are into the league this year. There's just too much going on, man. We don't need this. We can't handle this right now. So there does seem to be validity to that. Let me read to you from the CBS Sports story. The CBS story says, ultimately, at this point, there were too many presidents and athletic directors in the Big 12 who were not sold on UConn's benefit to the league, sources told CBS. Questions loomed about how UConn would be paid out. Having any of the 16 members give up any revenue money from the current media deal was a non-starter. So that's a point. I mean, what had previously really been reported was that Yormark had said this won't cost you guys anything. That was a key part of my take built around this. I was operating off of the information we had out there. That seems to leave it a little more open-ended, or at least like the schools were just like pressing Yormark on that and like, hey, can you prove that to us? Like, are we totally sure? Can you prove to us that there would not actually be any money that would come out of our pockets? Because that's always going to be a non-starter anyway, but especially now in this revenue sharing era, Big 12 athletic directors are looking at these line items on their budgets and going like, dude, like I can't take any money out for anybody. There's no way. We're doing things like playing conference games in week 0 in Ireland for an extra couple of $1 million. Thinking about naming the conference the All-State 12 for an extra couple of $1 million per school. Nobody is going to be giving anything up. So that is a key point of contention. If there was no guarantee of that, and there was a possibility that they would have to be paying money in the near term for that, I can understand some pushback there. There is this too. It says also potentially complicating matters. According to sources, UConn is locked into the Big East per league bylaws and would not have been able to exit without significant financial finagling until at least 2027, not 2026, as was previously reported. So part of this is just timing. And that is one of the things you see over and over again with some of the reporting on this. It's just been timing. The timing was not there for this to be apropos for Brett Yormark to do right now. And some of that is like he wanted, if you're going to do it and you're going to do this UConn basketball rental thing and you're not going to let football join for 7 years, you want basketball in as soon as possible. You want to start reaping the benefits of basketball as soon as possible. With all of this, you're doing this to squeeze all the juice that you can out of their basketball program and you becoming the SEC of basketball in effect with all the different programs that you have. And you are losing a year's worth of value if you can't get them in until 2027. So it's like, look, if that's the case, if it's not going to be realistic to do that for anybody because of whatever the cost would be, then we might as well just take a step back for right now. So it does feel like it was just a lot of things that added up here on Yormark. There's already internal push based on football. Like I told you guys, one thing that had been relayed to me, I think, was just a concern about how the college football playoff committee would treat the Big 12 if UConn were actually in the league, because you have Big 12 ADs who have been in that room recently. And I think they're of the opinion that that would not be a very good thing for the league. There's a lot of concern about that. There's concern about everything that's going on. They have too much on their plate. And then you're looking at it from the UConn part and you're like, damn, even that doesn't seem like it's going to work out. Like trying to pry UConn away from the Big East doesn't look like it's going to work out the way that I want it to right now. Might as well just, we're right here at the precipice of the season too. Like, let's just let it go. That goes back to something I remember I heard Craig Smoke say on 365, which I thought was perfectly understandable. He was like, I mean, look, why does this story have to come out like the week of game one in the Big 12? Like, we're just starting the season. Everything is going to be, the focus is going to be on that. It's going to be an awesome season. Why are we doing this right now? Like, why does that have to come out right now? So now you don't have to deal with it. Everybody can focus on football season. They can focus on trying to hit the revenue sharing number. And you know what? That's fine. Like, I'm not heartbroken. I was definitely excited by the idea. I thought it was enticing to potentially add UConn here, but I know not everybody agrees with me. So let me know what you think. I see all of you guys in the chat so far. Appreciate you. If you want to make sure that your chat gets on the show tonight, click the $ below the chat box. We'll create a super chat. And if you do that, it guarantees that I will read it on the show. You can also, if you are not watching live, contribute to the channel on Venmo, John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo. And if you leave a question or comment with your donation there, I will read it on the next show. So you can still be a part of everything, even if you're not here live. And that's where we check in with James. What's up, James? Thank you for your contribution on Venmo, my friend. James says, hi, John. Love your newsletter. Oh, well, thank you, James. A perfect time for me to insert the plug here. Just go to ofbnews.com or click the link in the description of this video, ofbnews.com, or click the link in the description of this video to get signed up for my Big 12 newsletter. I just sent out a week 2 primer, breakdown of all the games happening and ranked by watchability. I ranked them 5 Yormarks to 1 Yormark in terms of watchability. So you can get that every single week, multiple times a week, straight to your inbox. All the Big 12 news that you want, no SEC or Big 10 bias or filter that you have to read everything through. So ofbnews.com, Big 12 fans, or anybody else who wants to read about the Big 12 to get signed up for the newsletter. So thank you, James. What are your thoughts on these stats for decoupling media rights? So James is referencing here decoupling media rights. The reason that you would want UConn in the league is because your ultimate goal is to separate basketball media rights from football rights, sell them as 2 separate entities instead of together. So James mentions the NBA gets $6.9 billion and the NFL gets $9 billion. So media companies see basketball as 76% as valuable as football. With the Big 12's current deal, this would be roughly $291 million per year. Well, first of all, James, I have to say, no matter what, and I'm sure there will be people that will, come after this in one form or another and say, well, you can't really do that, or that's not totally fair. And look, I'll be honest, I don't know specifically how the industry would value it relative to this, but this is creative and I really like it. I would want to know, like, is it for the same time period? Like, is the NFL a shorter time period? So their number would actually be a little bit higher relative to the NBA. I think that's important, but you may well have done your research to get that all nailed down. I think it's been pretty clear in the realm of college football and basketball that basketball is definitely not valued at like 3/4, 75% of football. Now, if included in all of this were the NCAA tournament, like if the NCAA tournament is a part of this, then we're really talking, because that's the single most valuable entity that is out there is the NCAA tournament. But we're talking about regular season college basketball, which is a different sort of a deal. So with the NBA, that's like another thing I'm thinking there. The NBA, I imagine that the television rights for the postseason are all encompassed in the same deal there, right? So that's probably another thing that's adding value. Whereas with NCAA basketball, you're not getting the postseason element in there, which is the most valuable of everything. So those are a couple things that I think are probably would throw those numbers off a little bit. But to your general point, I mean, basketball does seem to be gaining more and more steam. You have more popularity with women's basketball as well with the WNBA and Caitlin Clark, and that's another area where I think UConn obviously can help a little bit. It's a little bit. It still is generally peanuts compared to football, but it does help. It's moving in the right direction. And frankly, like the NBA's popularity doesn't really hurt either. That it's becoming more and more popular and has grown into definitely the second most popular professional sport that is out there behind the NFL. So I like where your head's at. It's very creative. I think there might be some general points there about basketball moving in the right direction, but I do think there are some little caveats there. Like I assume the basketball media rights include the postseason, and if they do, that's something that would separate it from what the NCAA deal is. And then I would love to know the specifics on the years between the two there if they are the same. But it's interesting data, James. It's very interesting data. That's a great comment. I appreciate it. And I appreciate that you contributed there on Venmo, John-Kurtz-4. Okay. We have a little bit more here on the UConn front that I want to get to before I transition to week 2. Oh, we got some thunder outside in Kansas City. Wonder how that will affect the Chiefs game. Sources say, this is from CBS Sports, so this is to the point of don't shut this all down. This is a pause on the talks, not a we're ending the talks. It is a pause. And that was the first thing I said when I saw this. It was like, hey, note everybody. Brett Yormark says it is a pause on the UConn talks. So those that are celebrating, I wouldn't celebrate too terribly hard. But it says sources say Yormark still believes in UConn's upside and branding and is not abandoning hope the Huskies can one day be in the Big 12. He wants representation in the Northeast and knows UConn is the school that by far carries the most value. But he recognized that the timing wasn't right with UConn and agreed to step away to avoid fracturing matters in his new 16-team league, a source said. If everyone in the Big 12 wasn't on board, Yormark recognized it wasn't in the best interest of the conference to push the issue into the fall. That seems very reasonable from all different sides here. Yormark still wants this. He still thinks there's value. It's the second time he's pushed it. He's not a guy that gives up very easily. So I don't think he is going to give up on this. And, I don't know. Maybe this turns into just another instance where UConn wins a national championship and then all of a sudden it's kind of back out there, right? If they keep winning, I don't know. Maybe it helps the Brett Yormark cause a little bit, but we shall see. Jeremy, thank you for your concern. Very tactful as always, my friend. That is one thing that you bring to the table every single show. I was definitely feeling pretty crappy yesterday. Did not feel like I mentally had it to do a show. No, it is not from the bottle. I have not had a drink in like 3.5 or 4 years, but thank you for your concern, my friend. Golly, we got some crazy thunder. I don't know if you guys can hear that outside. This is the beauty of living in Kansas. It's like I can see sunshine peering in through the window, but we've got thunder going on at the same time. The one last note here, and this shouldn't really be too surprising, but I did see this come from Amanda Kristovich of Front Office Sports. UConn apparently sent out a little blurb. This must have been like an email or kind of like a letter from the AD. And in their language, it basically was saying like, hey, yeah, Brett Yormark is the one that called this off. Like UConn was not the one that abandoned this. I know there's been some debate on the UConn side of like, should we do this? Should we not? We love the Big East. Some fans really seem to be against the idea of the Big 12. Some UConn fans seem to be of the mindset, like, forget football, just get rid of it. Let's just focus everything in on basketball and stay in the Big East. But it was not UConn that abandoned these talks, because here is the letter from the AD. It says, undoubtedly, many of you have followed recent media reports about the Big 12's renewed interest in UConn as a conference member. It is always our objective to put UConn in the very best position for future success. So we did engage in exploratory dialogue with the Big 12. Ultimately, the Big 12 determined that it will pause on conversations about membership expansion. Certainly, it is flattering to be courted. It says a lot about UConn and what others think of us. Further, we've enjoyed tremendous success since our return to the Big East. So, UConn is kind of confirmed here. Like, yeah, this was definitely on the UConn side. or rather the Big 12 side, that they are backing off of this. This is not a UConn being like, nah, this ain't our thing. UConn, by all accounts, still is pretty interested. Okay, couple of super chats here, and then we are going to get into week 2 of college football. Gentle brutality. Oxymoron there. Appreciate that. Gentle brutality. Which football team is worse, Houston or Texas Tech? Well, I imagine this is supposed to be taking like a little bit of a dig at Texas Tech, who definitely did not play very good defense on Saturday in a 52-51 overtime win over Abilene Christian. But man, Houston's definitely worse. Houston's definitely worse. I mean, Baron Morton threw for a ton of yards. Like Texas Tech's offense was still looking in pretty good shape. Of course, I guess assuming Taj Brooks can stay healthy, which is definitely a concern this weekend at Wazoo. But Texas Tech is a much better team. And it's nothing against Houston. It's nothing against Willie Fritz. That's just going to be, that's a rebuild. You know, it's a rebuild. Like, was not going to turn over overnight. Willie Fritz has some work to do. And man, I don't know that it's going to get much better this week because Houston has to go to Norman to take on Oklahoma, which it's not 2016, as I wrote in the Open for Business newsletter. Again, ofbnews.com to subscribe to the newsletter. Greg Ward Jr. ain't walking through that door for Houston on Saturday as they go to Oklahoma. So, let's look. I would love nothing more than for Houston to put a legitimate scare into the Sooners, but I doubt that is happening. In Texas Tech, yes, I do think is a much better team. We'll see how Tech rebounds. They've got injury issues right now. Lost another defender for the year. The list of players that are questionable for them is very long, according to Joey McGuire for the game on Saturday. And like I said, it does include Taj Brooks, who's obviously the headliner of that team. I don't know, man. It feels like a bounce back spot for Texas Tech. It does. And that, as bad as things seem right now, Red Raider fans, I saw the reactions to the injury report that came out early this week. And I know how down in the dumps everybody was feeling about the loss, combined with, well, now everybody's hurt. What are we going to do? You go down and win this game, win a road game, and you'd be turning around looking like, hey, man, we're 2-0. Last year we started 1-3. Didn't win the game that went to overtime that we blew a big lead in and should have won. Didn't win it, and then things spiraled. Well, if you can all of a sudden be 2-0, like, hey, man, no one's going to remember at the end of the year or care that it was a 1-point win over Abilene Christian if you just keep winning games and keep figuring it out. So this can turn around pretty quickly, and you make a lot of improvement between week 1 and week 2, typically. And also, it is foolish to draw a bunch of conclusions from week 1. You can make observations, follow Josh Pate's advice, make observations, don't draw conclusions from what happens in week 1. Now, if you're Florida State and you lose to Georgia Tech in week 0, and then you get blasted by Boston College in week 1, then all right, we can start to draw some conclusions, I think, on Florida State. But I'm not doing it on Texas Tech yet. Bear Down Cats. What's up, Bear Down Cats? Thank you for being here. Bear Down Cat says, Bear Down, John. The Big 12 is in good basketball shape. Can't just add institutions just to add numbers. By the way, congrats to T-Mac. Well, working in reverse order. Yes. Teteroa McMillan is insane. That was an unreal performance that he put on Saturday. Over 300 receiving yards on 10 catches and 4 touchdowns. Insane stuff. Truly insane stuff. You've got 2 of the 3 best receivers in the country in the Big 12 between he and Travis Hunter. And as far as basketball, well, I don't think this was about just adding numbers. This was about literally adding the best basketball program in America right now. So that's not a numbers thing to me. I can understand if you just don't want them added. And you're right. I mean, the league is in good basketball shape, but you're trying to be the dominant force in basketball. It was at least opened up to some debate this year where people, well, the last couple of years, like 2 years ago, there was a lot of Big East talk. This year, with the ACC's run in the NCAA tournament, you started to get some of that. You want to shut it down. Like, you're trying to be the SEC of basketball, where in football right now, I mean, I guess some Big Ten fans could try to stir something up and say, hey, we're the best conference, but everybody knows who the best league is. It's the SEC. There's really no questioning it. We may not all like it, but there's really, truly no questioning it. So you're trying to be that with basketball. And if you added UConn, the back-to-back national champs, a program that's won 5 national titles since 1999, you're undoubtedly doing that. You are becoming that conference in hoops. So I think it has much more value than just simply adding the numbers. But I understand if you're of the opinion that you don't want to see UConn happen, and that today you are excited that this has been paused, at least for right now. So I appreciate you, Bear Down Cats. Thank you for being here. And best of luck to your Arizona Wildcats. Continuing on, I believe they have Northern Arizona. That's what I was trying to think of there real quick. It's Northern Arizona, right? Northern Arizona for the Wildcats this week before it'll be a very interesting one in Manhattan, literally 2 weeks or literally a week from tomorrow. I'm reading an email response here real quick. Okay, so week 2. The Big 12 does have an interesting bit of spotlight on it this week because everybody will be watching Texas, Michigan and paying attention to that. And it is certainly the headliner of the game going into the week. I get it. I wouldn't dispute that at all. But I will say this. I think there's a good chance that more people will be talking about Colorado, Nebraska by the end of the week than they will Texas, Michigan. Texas, Michigan just seems like that could be a very boring game. Michigan is certainly going to be able to defend enough, I think, to keep it pretty low scoring. But at the same time, I don't think they have enough offense to really truly compete with Texas. So in that respect, I think you're probably going to get some kind of 24-10 Texas win in the Big House, and people kind of be like, okay, Michigan didn't look that great week 1 against Fresno. They're starting the former walk-on kid at quarterback. The guy that wanted to win the job hasn't won the job. Their star running back looks pretty mediocre right now. Offensive line, not quite as dominant as it was the last 2 years. Like Michigan, everything's kind of pointing in the direction of a step back, and that may well be the story there, and it's not going to be some epic game that is really talked about quite a bit. Colorado, Nebraska is the game that, will matter far less when it comes to the national scope of things. Like, I think Colorado and Nebraska are both bowl teams. I do not think they're teams that are going to seriously threaten to be in the college football playoff picture. Though, if I were to add a caveat to that, it would be that Nebraska's schedule is conducive enough that they may actually hang around in that picture a little bit longer than they probably should have if they win this game. And I think this game has the makings of a shootout. I don't know that either defense is going to be able to do a ton to stop the other. I mean, Colorado did a lot of damage last year offensively to that Nebraska defense, which was pretty good. And look, we all saw the Colorado defense on display against North Dakota State, made that offense look pretty good. And that's not an offense I think of as being very explosive. So I would imagine that there are going to be a lot of points scored. I imagine it will be really fun. You've just got a lot of fun elements in this game. Like Dylan Raiola is fun. I hate to admit it. I would rather Nebraska continue to wallow forever, but they're not. And they seem to have found a real quarterback here in Raiola. So he also has the mannerisms of Patrick Mahomes. He's like a freaking, the Diet Coke to Patrick Mahomes Coca-Cola. Like, it is very similar when you watch the two. So that adds an element, I think, of fun to the matchup. And then just everything that comes along with Coach Prime and the casuals that watch because of Colorado and the extra debate. That always generates extra debate and discussion. It's a former rivalry game. I think there's a lot here that could really put a ton of spotlight on that. And the interesting thing to me, like I said early in the week, Big 12 fans, you need to put on your Ralphie shirt this week. I know a lot of people get really annoyed with the Colorado stuff and want to see Colorado lose. But if you're a Big 12 fan, that is not the prudent thing. The prudent thing to do would be to root for the Buffs in this one. I am sorry, friends. Getting a win over the Big 10 would be nice, especially when it's a high-profile team. It is not one of your best teams, but it is a high-profile team that people do watch. And the longer that Colorado can stay relevant and the more wins you can stack against the Big 10 and the SEC, which you have 6 opportunities to do that this weekend, by the way, if you're the Big 12, you should be rooting for that. You should very much be rooting for that. I don't really understand the people that were telling me, and there were plenty of people on Twitter telling me this week, like, I can't do it. Hate Colorado. I don't know. My hatred has always been much stronger for Nebraska from back in the day when both were in the league. Yes, Colorado has some unruly and annoying fans. They always did. I saw the video this week of one of their games against Nebraska in the early 2000s where the entire Colorado student section got kicked out. Like, I get it. I mean, I understand why people don't really like them, especially now with all of the casual fans that jump on the Colorado bandwagon. I understand it. But you got to understand, you need this league. Everybody talks about, hey, the Big 12 is awesome. I hear from so many of you on this channel, like, hey, the Big 12 is awesome. We should puff out our chests. We should have more respect. The league needs to stand up for itself. If you've ever had that opinion, you need to be rooting for Coach Prime this weekend. You need to be rooting for Coach Prime to go win in Lincoln. That's just the reality of the situation. Like it or not, you got to be like Mike Gundy, okay? Can you guys imagine everything we know about Mike Gundy? Very much more a substance over style kind of guy. Everything we know about him. Do you think that he really, like, genuinely is like, man, like Coach Prime, he's doing it the way I would do it. That's my kind of dude. No, of course not. But Mike Gundy has swallowed his pride and publicly said, I stood right in front of him as he said it at Big 12 Media Days, he's great for the league. Coach Prime is great for the league. Colorado, they know how to bring eyeballs to the league, and that's a good thing. If Mike Gundy can do it, you can do it, my friends. So please, please do this weekend. Please, please do. I certainly will be rooting for Colorado. I will very much so be rooting for Colorado. And I'm looking forward to this weekend because, well, I love going to the K-State games and covering it, and I was in the press box and all that last week. This week, I'm at home. K-State's in New Orleans. I'm not going to that game. I can sit back and just watch 4 different screens all day at home and take it all in and get a better feel for everything that's going on. So I look forward to watching that game. Now, I saw somebody else talking about Oklahoma State and Arkansas, and actually, Kyle, I'll use Kyle's comment here. If Oklahoma State doesn't beat Arkansas, it will be a bad year for the Big 12. It would definitely be a bad thing. I'm not sure that it would 100% guarantee that it would be a bad year for the Big 12, but it would send out some really bad warning signals. We're not at like tornado warning at that point where rotation has been spotted, but we're definitely in tornado watch. We're in bad season watch period as opposed to bad season warning period if Oklahoma State loses to Arkansas. Now, I do not think that is going to happen. Arkansas, they looked mesmerizing in week 1, but that was Arkansas Pine Bluff, who is terrible. The new quarterback that Arkansas has certainly looked enticing. You combine that with KJ Jefferson really struggling for a good portion of his first start with UCF. And, you can see a path to where perhaps Arkansas has improved from, I believe they were 4-8 last year. Did not make a bowl game. You can definitely see a path to where they're a better team, but that's a team that Oklahoma State should still handle. You've got all the experience. You've got a definite coaching edge there when you're talking about Sam Pittman against Mike Gundy. You're going to what I've called the best atmosphere in the Big 12 pre-4 corner schools coming in. I think Utah definitely has an argument now, but we're talking about at least one of the 2 best atmospheres in the league to go play a game in. No way that Oklahoma State should be losing this game. Not at all. Now, if you want to point out some concerns, I know Mike Gundy was kind of thought the run game was so-so week 1, and that is fair. It took Ollie Gordon a lot of carries to get those 100 yards. If you are just looking at the total yardage, be like, oh, okay, he had like 132 yards. But it took a lot to get there, and the yards per carry was not great, so maybe some concern there about the Oklahoma State offensive line and the job they were doing. And then, the defense gave up some big plays, which also we're talking about problems that could be leaking over from last year. That would be one if the defense is going to be really susceptible to giving up big plays. Arkansas created a lot of big plays last week, so definitely keep that in mind, okay? But I will say, to the original premise that I jumped off here with Kyle's comment, last year the Big 12 had losses to, I always forget the entire list, but Oklahoma State lost to South Alabama, right? And they still rallied and made it to the Big 12 championship game. It was South Alabama, Rice. And there were like 5 losses like that. Texas State that were really bad for the league in the non-conference. And I guess you could say, if you wanted to, it was a bad year last year. Texas won the league in its last year. So maybe if you want to say, well, John, yeah, all that happened. It was a bad year last year for the Big 12. Like, okay. You definitely don't want to start stacking home losses against the Big Ten and the SEC, especially when this one is one where you are the favorite and you have the better atmosphere and you frankly have the much better program right now. And you should be winning this game. So yeah, that would be a particularly disappointing loss for the Big 12 to have this weekend out of all the matchups that we have between the Big Ten, SEC, and Big 12. Arkansas at Oklahoma State, Iowa State at Iowa, Kansas at Illinois, Colorado at Nebraska, Houston at Oklahoma, Mississippi State at Arizona State. You know what I mean? The rest of them, obviously, Houston, you figure, is going to lose and lose handily at Oklahoma. Colorado at Nebraska, I mean, they're like a touchdown underdog. So as much as it would be good for Colorado to win, they are a TD underdog. So that it's hard to register that one as nearly as disappointing as the Oklahoma State result would be. Mississippi State at Arizona State, I mean, that's another one of those games where I'm like, it is really hard to get a read on this because I love the improvement that we saw from Arizona State in week 1, but how legit is it? I'm going to need to see more to believe that they can produce results like that week in, week out. Mississippi State's a different kind of animal, even if they're a lower level SEC team. Kansas at Illinois, that would be definitely disappointing. It's one where I can tell you right now, I do not understand the line. This feels to me like Kansas is about 2 touchdowns better than Illinois. Like, I guess I get that they're going to have a sellout for the first time since 2016, which shout out to Lance Leipold and Kansas football for that. People are showing up and selling out for the first time in 8 years to watch you come into their building and play. That is a testament to where that program has been built in a very short period of time. But they seem so much better. I mean, last year they played with their food toward the end of the game and let Illinois back into it. But when they were interested and locked in with a healthy Jalen Daniels, they killed them. I don't see how Illinois actually hangs with Kansas. That would be close to as disappointing, but because Oklahoma State is so much more of a developed, established program here, losing that game to Arkansas to me would be much more disappointing. Iowa State at Iowa. Iowa State has lost 6 of the last 7 there in that series. They're a slight underdog there. It's on the road. That still is tough. I think it would be nice if Iowa State could win. And this is what I will say to you guys who I was just preaching to about, hey, root for Colorado this weekend. I will be rooting for the Clones this weekend. I will be rooting for the Clones this weekend against Iowa. Look, I don't really like Iowa football very much because to me, they embody a lot of what is frustrating about the Big Ten. That they would just load up on an awful Big Ten West schedule every year, go to the Big Ten championship game and get waxed and call it good, and then go play a bowl game in Florida and be like, all right, well, we won 9 or 10 games. I hate that, much like I hate the Penn State vibe with that, which made last week very, very bitter for your boy that West Virginia was not able to pull that off. I have seen some talk. I was reading an article about Iowa State, where they were making the point, I think it was the Des Moines Register, was like making the point like, hey, this game actually carries some playoff implications this year. And I had to kind of scratch my head and say like, does it? I guess maybe more for Iowa than Iowa State because Iowa is going to be building an at-large case if they're going to make the playoff. I don't think anybody would expect them to be able to actually beat Oregon or Ohio State, maybe Penn State for that matter, for a Big Ten championship. But they were even saying like Iowa State, if Iowa State wants to build an at-large case, their point was they win this game and you start looking at their schedule, which is very backloaded in the Big 12, they could get to the point where they're 7 or 8-0 and there's a lot of buzz building about them. And now you're talking about, maybe knocking on the door of the top 10, 11, 12 in the country. And there would be enough of a narrative developed at that point that you could survive not winning the actual league. And then that could create an at-large situation for Iowa State. I still think that's perhaps a little bit far-fetched, but the point is true. If Iowa State wins this game, their schedule sets up very nicely for them to be 6-1, 7-0, 7-1, 8-0, something like that by the time they hit the last 4 games of their schedule, which are much more difficult. So from that standpoint, I suppose it could be very, very important for Iowa State. I mean, it's important. It's a rivalry game. It's important. Matt Campbell has only beaten Iowa once. You want to prove that you are legit. You want to pay off some of the offseason hype here. So that, look, lots of reasons that game obviously does matter. I'm just still not totally convinced that it would matter for an at-large case. But perhaps I am wrong. And it would certainly give Iowa State a lot of momentum trying to sprint toward a Big 12 championship game appearance this year. I am really interested outside of, like, I've kind of given you these games, these headliner games. I am also very interested tomorrow to watch BYU SMU as much as I am able to. Because it's a Friday night, I'm not sure how much I will be able to watch the game live. But boy, Big 12 Twitter would love nothing more than for BYU to win that game and shut SMU fans up a little bit, right? I mean, SMU fans, very mouthy now that they're in the ACC by just literally paying their way in. They fancy themselves ACC title contenders. And even after just a gross performance in week 0 against Nevada, I'm sure SMU fans are right back riding that wave because now Florida State is vomiting all over themselves. This would be an awesome one to see BYU go in and win that game. Hey, BYU, who was picked in the bottom 4 of the Big 12, goes in and beats SMU, big bad SMU, now suddenly in a Power 4 conference. Go beat them in their house. It'd be great. You're going to have to slow down a pretty explosive offense. Wasn't always explosive in week 1 against Nevada, a little bit sloppy, but I do think SMU is going to have a pretty good offense. Is the BYU defense actually up to the task? We shall see. Is Jake Retzloff's performance from week 1 in any way repeatable? Yeah, that was Southern Illinois. We shall see. But there is more reason for optimism, I can understand, for BYU fans coming out of week 1 having seen that. So it's kind of what I'm looking at this week. I mean, look, K-State, my Wildcats are going to Tulane. That is a fairly tricky game. I don't think Tulane is quite what they have been the last couple of years. They were sort of struggling by halftime with the game that they played last week against a team that's not very good at all. They've got some quarterback carousel going on, a young quarterback that's going to be making the start against the K-State defense that looked really good. I think the K-State defense will probably have to carry them. I think a line, like a spread of about 10 points, seems about right. But I'm not overly worried about K-State losing the game. Could be famous last words, but I actually feel a little bit less nervous about that game now that we are here, having seen what happened in week 1, than I was before the season. And that's with taking into account, totally understand, K-State passing game needs some work. It did look rough in week 1. So we shall see. But there's a lot of interesting games. Baylor, I guess the one other game I should mention is Baylor-Utah. Utah 15-point favorite. Because it's at home, it's hard to argue with that too much. Utah came out and just, I mean, I'm sitting here talking about, well, it's been over 600 days since Cam Rising took a snap in an actual college football game. Yeah, all he did was throw 5 touchdown passes on 5 straight drives to start the game, and they're up 35-0 at halftime. Like, could not have looked much better for Utah. They're going to be down a corner the rest of the year, and it does sound like the secondary is probably a little more thin than they would like it to be. But Utah's a force at home. They've lost 2 games in 5+ years now at Rice-Eccles. They're a force. That will be difficult. Baylor pushed them last year, even as poor as Baylor was, but that was Utah without Cam Rising, and that was Utah not in their home building where they're virtually unbeatable with Kyle Whittingham and Cam Rising. So I don't expect Baylor to keep it particularly close, but I do look forward to watching DeQuan Finn because that first touchdown that he had, I was watching shout out to the Baylor guy who does the Baylor games in 20 minutes. So I was able to see most of that game through that first touchdown he had where he kind of, pump fakes and just takes off and scampers. I was like, oh boy, that's fun. Quan Finn is fun, man. Sometimes a little too fun through a couple of picks, but he's fun. He's fun. So I look forward to the quarterback matchup in that game. Okay. I think that's going to about do it for me. we'll cut it off a little bit early here. This was more of an impromptu show because I was not able to talk to you guys last night. But I appreciate everybody coming in here. I may try to do one thing I'd like to experiment with, especially on these weekends where I'm not on location covering the K-State game. I'd like to experiment with maybe doing like a live reaction show on Saturday, either after a particularly big Big 12 game or maybe just later in the day as things are winding down. So we'll see. We'll see. To be determined. I don't want to make any promises. I will feel that one out. But there's a chance that I might try to do that and just see how it goes. See how everybody enjoys it. So if you're a Big 12 fan, sign up for the Open for Business newsletter, ofbnews.com. Appreciate all the guys who do. That is the best way to support me right now. You can also support the channel on Venmo, John-Kurtz-4. But just like the video. That helps too. And make sure that you sneak in all the comments that you can in the comment section. All that stuff is great. Spread the word about the channel. Spread the word about the newsletter. And let's keep growing and growing. Alan getting in here. What's up, Alan? Appreciate you, man. Alan says, John, go Big 12, 6-0 this weekend. Go Buffs, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Houston, Arizona State, and Kansas. Alan just nailing all the teams that are playing Big 10 and SEC squads this weekend. Big 12 probably favored in 5 of those games. Ready to start playing them for the JK tailgate at Sunflower Showdown. Hey, Alan, I'm ready for it, man. Hit me up on Twitter. Shoot me an email, whatever it might be. I will very much get that going to meet up with you at the tailgate. Big 12 probably favored in 5 of the games. Oklahoma State is favored. Iowa is like a 2.5-point favorite against Iowa State. Kansas is favored by like 5. Nebraska is like a 7-point favorite. Obviously, Oklahoma's a big favorite. Arizona State is favored by 6.5. So I think we got Arizona State, Illinois, Arizona State, Kansas, Oklahoma State are all favorites. I think it's 3-3, Alan. I think it's 3-3. But if you wanted to say, hey, Iowa State should actually be the favorite, okay, maybe I could listen to that, like 4-2. I think it's tougher to make the case for 5, but the Big 12 should very much be in probably 5 of the 6 games. I'll put it that way. The Big 12 should be in 5 of the 6 games. I think 5-1 or 4-2 is realistic, and you'd have to be really happy about the Big 12 weekend if they go 4-2 or 5-1 in those games. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you being here. Enjoy watching the Kansas City Chiefs tonight, and I will talk to you all soon.